Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink with a couple of cards using hot foiling and watercoloring and splatter and all the fun things. So I started off with hot foiling. I have my Spellbinders Glimmer hot foil machine there on the right, and it's turned on and warming up. And I am using Simon Says Stamp's newest hot foil plates. So this first one is the Spring Florals hot foil plate. And I trimmed down some gold glimmer foil. And I've been mentioning this in videos when I do hot foiling. For whatever reason, what my the magical solution for me that just seems to work every time is to tape the hot foil and the plate to the cardstock I'm foiling on. And I use Spellbinders little narrow tape. They have 3 widths of this yellow washi tape. And the narrowest one is the one I use on whatever I'm hot foiling. And it just seems to work. And also because Spellbinders made it this way. The whole point of it is it's not supposed to leave residue, etc. And yeah, so far so good with that. And I think taping it, just the biggest thing is it just holds everything in place. Nothing's shifting, weird, whatever. You can see I also trim off any of the excess foil because the less peeking out, the better. It doesn't need to be perfect, but if there's larger pieces, I just trim them off. And if they're a decent size, I keep those little leftovers because I use them for, little sentiments and things like that. So cardstock, in this case watercolor paper, pretty side of the foil facing away from the paper, facing up, and then the pretty side of the plate facing the pretty side of the foil. I tape it all down. I set it in the Glimmer machine. I press the button to heat up. It takes that button that flashes, it takes about a minute or so. And then I pull it off and I run it through my Spellbinders Platinum 6 machine because the Platinum 6 machine adds the pressure. That's where you get the lovely letter press and then the foiling, and it's just chef's kiss. I'm obsessed. Now that I'm finally getting it to work the last however many months, it just makes me happy. Now, smoother cardstocks always foil better, and glossy cardstocks foil the absolute best. But I have been, every once in a while, and this was just a test with these. I was like, let's see if I can get it to show up. I've done it before on watercolor paper, but, it can always be a hit and a miss. But both times it foiled perfectly. That made me so happy. So since I was, when things are going good, I was like, you know what? I'm going to use the leftover foil bits and reverse foil those as well, because why not? So this is the PinkFresh solid hot foil plate. This one can get finicky. I used to have so many more issues, and I couldn't get it to work for the longest time. And I had Yanis Makula because she works with Spellbinders. She was giving me tips and all the different things. But honestly, the biggest thing that, whatever reason, is a game changer is just taping the foil to the cardstock. I don't know, man. I think just it kind of eliminates things curling up and it keeps it all in one spot. So I'm just using Simon's smooth white cardstock. And I'm just using the leftover bits of tape because I just save them all. I stick them to the machine and just reuse them. And I tape these, the leftover foil to cardstock. And again, just Simon Smooth White cardstock. And the other thing to note too is that using the big solid hot foil plate, it gets very hot and it will fuse the tape to the cardstock, even though Spellbinders designed it not to do that, yada yada. This is higher heat because it's a big solid plate, so just be aware of that. You'll see me I have to pick at it to get it off, but that's fine. The other thing, if you struggle, is with the big solid hot foil plates, is you can put it on your machine, warm it up, turn your machine off with the plate still on there, and turn it on and warm it up a second time. That might also be a game changer for you. I was doing that before and that seemed to work better, but this actually just taping it to the paper, just magical. I honestly don't know why. I think it just keeps things from moving. You know what I mean? So there you go. I got a great result. It just worked. So I have not needed to heat up the solid plate any longer, but that is another option. And then because my foil is taped to the cardstock, this is the only time I will generally run it back and forth just once, like one extra time in my machine. I don't do that with anything else I'm hot foiling because that can sometimes cause a problem when you run things back and forth in your machine. And again, the plates might shift, the foil might shift, and you end up with a mess. But hopefully that helps anyone that, you know, has any random things. And then also there's a lot of makers that have done a lot of troubleshooting and like other tips and tricks and things like that. So far, this is what's been working for me. So after I did my hot foiling, I've super sped this up. These didn't take super long to watercolor. They're, you know, I think each one took me like 20-ish minutes, something like that. I usually don't like including, because like people used to always ask me how long it takes to color, and I generally don't time myself because I just find like once you start timing yourself in that sense, I find it stressful. You know, even though I'm doing this as a job, I like to color. I like to watercolor, I like to color, etc. But the only reason I know is because sometimes I'll see the timestamps on my videos. So that's why I share that info. But anyway, I'm using my Mijello Mission Gold watercolors. I pulled them out recently for a different card and I was like, oh, I haven't used these in forever. You know, it's just how I rotate between all my different coloring mediums. Because like, oh, I forgot about you. You were a favorite. You're my favorite again. You know, things like that. So I did just layers of watercolor. That's something that I like to practice with when I do start, you know, watercoloring again. I've said this, I have a very heavy hand when it comes to just everything. You guys have seen my cards. I'll add 15 layers and all the things, you know, but it's the same thing with coloring. I go in and I'll go in heavy. So even with this first one, I went in heavier than what I'm working towards, I should say. So I just worked in layers, just light layers. And I was pretty much working mostly from just the randomness that was in my palette. And just kind of kept building up the color. And I'm just using my little cheapo Nouveau brush for this, nothing fancy. And a lot of times I would clean off my brush, pinch off any of the excess water in the bristles, and that's what you use. It just creates a thirsty brush so that it can soak up some of the excess if you have too much color that you've laid down, which I do all the time. So with this one, like the flower itself, I don't feel like I went too heavy-handed. It's the background that honestly, in the end, I wasn't super happy with. But I took this little experience and I applied it to when I color the next floral. So we'll get to that in a minute. But I just went around and painted around this. I felt like it needed something. And like I said, I wasn't super happy with it, but I went with it. And I'm going to add splatter, of course. And I still ended up finishing it as the card because I still liked it. There was a different look I was going for, I guess, is how I'm trying to explain it. Sometimes hard to explain like what was going on in my head versus what y'all can see on camera. So anyway, after it was dry, I took my Ranger Perfect Pearl powder with my little fan brush, added some water. So I'm going to add some splatter and it's just going to give it a nice, like really shimmer splatter that I love. And you'll see that more like at the end of the video because I'll tilt it in light and everything because you really can't see this very much at all as it is, but that's also why I love it. And then I took white gouache, added that to just an acrylic block, added some water to thin it out, splattered that with my fan brush. And then finally I took just the regular paintbrush, which again, and I don't know why I keep doing this. I've said this in other videos. I prefer my fan brush. I get way better splatter with this. I don't know. I feel like I can control it more. Every time I grab a brush like this now, like just a regular brush, I'm never happy with it when it comes to splattering. Just go figure. But anyway, set that one aside. And then for this one, I really, because again, it's funny how if you do more than one of something, whether it be both the same image or whatever, and regardless of what coloring medium it is, if you do more than one, the first one is technically kind of your tester, but I just 99% of the time I keep the tester and I still use it in a finished card because just why not? I put the time into it, but this time I went a little lighter, a little lighter hand, a little more water. And again, I was just working with like kind of some of the randomness that was in this palette. So I kind of had like a pinky purple color for the base. And then I happened to have just this little bit of like purple right at the very kind of bottom of the palette there. And I was picking that up and just adding that. And I don't know, the colors that it was created, this purpley, pinky mauve sort of mix was just, it just hit all the right spots. I was like, I'm really liking how this is happening. You know, how the colors are going. And again, I was keeping just a lighter hand. It's hard for me to do that. And also always remember too, is watercolor dries back. Because, you know, when it goes on wet, it looks one way and then it dries back. So you always got to wait. Always let things dry. If you're absolutely hating it, walk away. You know, go do something else, come back to it with fresh eyes. I've done that many times. I didn't have to do it today, but I've done that many times where I'm like, this is a hot mess and I just wasted how much of my time, you know. Walk away, come back, and it's like, oh, this is fine. Or at the very least, it's like, this is doable. I can make this work. So I did all my little painting with the little pink and purple bits. And then I mixed just a little bit of yellow and brown for the flower centers. And then for the little branch, again, I had, you know, random multiple browns in my palette there mixed up. So I just picked those up and used that. Same with the green. And then this one, I was able to achieve the background look I was going for. This is what I was referring to with the previous one. I went in with just plain water first. So everything's wet, so things will move. And then I just dropped in just a little bit of color, you know, so I use that same kind of pinky color here and there around the florals and a little bit of the green. So it's just softer. This was the look I was going for. Both are great, but this is what I was wanting to do with the first one. But, you know, my brain wasn't quite there yet. And now it's like, okay, this is what I wanted to do. So same thing. I let that dry. And then I added my Perfect Pearl powder with water, fan brush, splatter that over the whole little panel, reactivated what was left on the acrylic block with that white gouache. And then I just swirled my wet fan brush in one of the like pinky purple colors here in my palette and just got a little bit of that on the brush. Added that splatter as well, because you can never have too much. And then I set those aside to dry. So now I've got my reverse hot foil images here. I just quickly fussy cut these out with my little cutter bee scissors, just slightly outside the, these white lines, because again, it's a reverse foil image. I decided that I wanted to use these on the insides of the cards, although again, you could totally create some like black, gold, and white cards. Totally would have worked, but I needed something for the insides of the cards, so that's what I'm going to use them for. But that would have been another option, is to put these on the front of a card, add a black die cut sentiment and some bling, yes. And some splatter. Anyway, I just did, simple fussy cutting. And when things like this, that's when you see the little pile of like the scraps. When you're cutting around images like this, I find it's just easier to cut those off as I'm going, so they're not getting in the way and poking me and, you know, all the things. So this honestly though didn't take very long, so I got those cut. When my backgrounds there were dry, I die cut those with one of Simon's stitched rectangle wafer dies. So cut down the panels, plus it gives the fun little stitching edge. And then I took the new Reverse Friend Sentiment Strip packs and chose the sentiments I wanted to use. And all of those I just die cut with different sized sentiment label wafer dies. So I got my sentiments, I got my, you know, watercolor florals, I got my hot foils. I was going to leave it as is and just keep the card bases like simple and plain. But then I was like, oh, I've got this quilted background stamp. And y'all know I love me any sort of like geometric type background stamp. So I put that face up on my work surface, and then I inked it up with Simon's Sprout ink, so just nice light green ink. And I'd already took some Post-it tape and I'd applied that to my card base at the fold line. And then I'm going to press the card front into the background stamp. I used a bit of just scratch paper to keep the ink from getting on my fingers and me getting it everywhere like I always do. And another thing I could have done is after stamping the card fronts, I could have inked this up again with just like a light gray ink, like Simon's flannel ink, stamped that on the inside and added a sentiment. That would have worked great. And then I could have still used the hot foil, the reverse hot foil images on, like I said, separate cards, black, gold, white, clean and simple, love. But one, hindsight. Two, I'm just giving extra ideas because. So I'd stamp both of the card fronts. And then for the little florals that I had die cut, I put Simon's Big Mama foam tape on the back. And I had them sitting here since I just filmed the release and review video. These are Simon's new like Positively Everything scissors. And I was curious, and I was like, I wonder, because I am picky about scissors always. And two, when it comes to cutting, again, if you've ever cut adhesive frequently, you know what I mean. A lot of scissors just don't hack it. They get gummed up. It's a pain in the butt, etc. That's why I usually always use my snips with, especially Simon's Big Mama foam tape. This stuff's sticky. These scissors cut through it like butter. And I did a test in a sense, because I'm going to cut it down. And I don't do that very often because usually no matter what, the foam tape sticks to the scissors, and it's annoying, you know. And then the next time, if you don't clean it off, the next time you go to use the scissors, they're gunky and stuck, you know, they have the sticky bits, and this just cut through. Like, I was impressed, genuinely, you know, because like a lot of times scissors will claim to have, you know, non-stick coating, and I can disprove that one within 5 minutes and be like, yeah, no, you know, but it just sliced through. I might have a new favorite pair of adhesive scissors because of course I have like 20 pairs, all for different things, plus backups because they like to disappear, you know. Us crafters, we have a bajillion supplies, but then, you know, you always have to have extras of certain things. Reverse tweezers, scissors. No, I'm not even going to start listing all the things you need extras of, or that I have extras of, because it's pretty much everything. But anyway, I adhered the little sentiment strips with the foam tape as well. On the inside, I adhered those reverse foil images and the rest of the sentiment with craft tacky glue. And then I flipped over the card and just used the edge of the card as my guide, trimmed off the little bits that were hanging off, and then repeated the process with the second card. So adhered the main sentiment. I used my little T-square ruler for that because, again, the older I get, I've got astigmatism in both my eyes that just continually gets worse. And I can't eyeball things like I used to. I used to be so good at it. Now I use all the little tools to help, and it's great. So adhered the reverse hot foil image, adhered the little sentiment, let the glue sit for a minute, and then again, flip that over, trimmed it off. As always, a person could end here, but of course I'm going to add a little bit of bling. So I pulled out just some of the little like confetti pieces from the Pretty Pastels sequin mix, and then I used some kind of greeny color confetti pieces from a previous release. These are the Morning Glory sequin pack, and I just, you know, spread a few of those around each of these cards, and then I'm going to adhere them into place with little dabs of craft tacky glue, and just using my little embellishment wand to pick them up, put down a dab of glue, press that in, let that adhere, good to go. So once those are adhered, I'm going to pair these cards with some gold A2 envelopes, and that's going to finish them off. And then I'll tilt this in the light so you can see the foil, the shimmer of that Ranger Perfect Pearl splatter, all the good things I love. So, as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I'll have a supply list. I will link to all of the supplies I used. That will be directly below in the description box. Today's video is also part of a blog hop, so I will have all that info in my blog post. There'll be links and giveaway codes, all that stuff. Just check out my blog post. That'll be the first link below the video for all that fun stuff. And as always, thank you all so very much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. I would love it. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.